I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
There we go.
Welcome,
Very
everybody, back to Anatomy of a Movie. We are doing our Thanksgiving special film in this podcast, Planes, Trains, Automobiles, a great 1987 John Hughes film. And we have our full panel here, and I am your host, Marisa Serafini. Joining me, I have
Sara Stretton.
Hello, everybody. Demetri Panos.
We have Phil Svitek in the booth. Say hello, Phil.
Hello, everybody.
And
Hi,
we
Phil.
have our special guest with us, Cami Martinez. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey,
Be
Cami.
here. Hi.
Cami, you are director of Technicolor.
Correct.
And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we're also expecting John, too, who's going to slip in to talk about this fun movie as well.
And we're
He
going to
missed
use
his
a new
flight.
He missed his
his
flight.
flight.
He's taking a train.
The Thanksgiving vacationing, the whole traveling is getting in the way of him.
Hopefully he gets here eventually.
Eventually. Yeah. And we're going to utilize a new part of this. Well, not a new old part of the set when he comes in.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
He'll be the first person on the couch.
Yes, the couch we usually don't see. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, a great John Hughes film. I would definitely say a classic right now. What are your overall thoughts of this movie?
So this movie I probably saw the first time maybe like 10 years ago. But so I had to revisit it. And what were you about to say?
I'm just saying.
Dimitri?
Well, yeah,
What were you about to say?
Why don't you lead with?
I don't know.
Came out.
I can't lead with that because this isn't funny.
It is.
We get here and literally the just jokes of me not being born for this is just kept rattling. No, I was not born during this film, but I still like it.
It's a great movie.
Although
You
I
just
must
should.
say, a lot of things would have been solved if it was now. Cell phones, more prominent, not always have to use dial tone. I don't know.
Yes, internet.
Things I don't
internet,
understand.
ATMs.
I don't
Exactly.
comprehend anymore. To me, there was just so many solutions, but they didn't exist.
It didn't exist in
Not at that
1987.
time.
26 years ago.
So, Demetri, what do you think of this film?
Oh, well, I love this movie. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. John Hughes, big fan. And, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was one of his first forays where he wasn't using a cast of teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was a rated R comedy. Believe it or not, this movie is going to celebrate its, what is it, the 22nd today? In 3 days, it'll be celebrating its 26th birthday.
Wow.
So 26 years ago, almost to the date that we're doing this podcast, wicked exciting for me. Such a great movie. The pairing of John Candy and Steve Martin, John Hughes again writing and directing. I can't say enough about this movie and the time period from which it came out. I think this movie, outside of the fact that you were saying, with technology, it's timeless. It's just
Definitely
a
timeless.
funny movie and brilliant in the way that it's written. We talked, I think, was it last week? We talked about shortness of movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
This movie's 90 minutes long.
Oh, and it could have been a lot longer.
And
And it was.
theoretically, or the rumor mill has it, that they shot at least 3 hours of footage of this movie, and that all of that footage is somewhere in a Paramount vault. And it's a mishmash of scenes and stuff that they had filled. But listen, 90 minutes, it's in, it's out. John Hughes' expertise in writing, the way that he's able to establish his characters, everybody is identifiable, which makes a great John Hughes movie, or it makes any comedy. You need to identify with somebody in order to laugh, and
Agreed.
John Hughes was able to do that in Planes, Trains, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Weird Science.
Slew of movies.
Right, it's
yeah.
his slew of movies, but the one thing is it's identifiable, and between Neal Page, and John Candy's character Del Griffiths, they're very identifiable. And we were talking about brevity in this movie. sets the pins up, knocks them down, keeps the conflict going, progresses, and before you know it, the movie's over. And you're like, wow, it was a great ride. And that we got to go on planes, trains, and automobiles. Love it. And for the nostalgia reason. Fantastic.
And Cami, what do you think of this movie? You're a fan as well.
Yes, I'm a fan. I like the movie. I think, too, right now, with it being Thanksgiving, that it's a great time to watch it. The thing is, it came up because, I have children. And what is a good age for them to see it? So, again, I grew up in the 80s. This is an 80s film. I remember it, but I actually thought it was more PG-13. I said, it's an R. Am I going to let all my children watch it? My youngest is 10. And so we watched it, and it was just a little bit interesting because I thought there's only really one part in it that I found this is why it's R-rated. And, of course, that's when, Steve Martin's character is quite upset, and he goes into the rental car.
His
when this
tirade.
goes on, yes.
Says the F word, I believe, 18 times.
18 times within 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And I can almost get that monologue down to a T. Almost have it.
Oh, yeah. Actually, you did that at work. It was
I did
great.
it.
It was like almost verbatim.
I did
is
it
how
all,
it happened.
and I did it over the PA system. No, I can't.
Yeah. And Phil, I believe, who hasn't seen this movie, just watched this movie for the first time. Phil, what were your thoughts being a new viewer to this film?
I enjoyed it heavily.
Phil, you hadn't seen. Wow.
Even
this
I
is the
had
first
seen
time.
it.
Yeah, I was going to say that the fetus here has even seen it. You haven't seen
stop
it
beating
yet?
Okay, here's the
Sarah.
thing.
I'm not.
Here's the thing. I am a fan of the. I'm a fan of the more obscure comedies of all of them, including Lonely Guy. That to me, which is a Steve Martin movie, that to me is hysterical. And obviously Uncle Buck for John Candy and things like that. So I'm more familiar with that work of theirs than this one. I don't know. I also grew up in a foreign household, so it wasn't like the classic movie. We didn't grow up with that.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it.
Yes, I think this is a very enjoyable movie, and let's just get into how this movie really started. It was based off of John Hughes' real-life experience traveling from, I believe it was
New York to Chicago.
To Chicago,
Yeah.
and he ended up getting landing in Wichita, and
It took him 5 days to get home.
yeah.
And a lot of his movies are based off of something that happened to him, or he was very relatable. But yeah, that's
That's just, it's quite a story. It's so funny that he is willing to go into his own personal life. I love writers who are willing to do that kind of, and just make fun of their lives and themselves and let people enjoy with them. Because that's what he did. You get Steve Martin's line probably 3/4 of the way through being like, well, one day I'm going to look back at this and laugh on it. And that's really what John Hughes is doing with this movie. He's just laughing at his own life. And so I was really happy that it did come from a true story.
Yeah, and I'm glad how John Hughes took what can seem like a very frustrating few days of his life into a fun comedic time that you can actually enjoy and look back at.
absolutely.
Right. It also had its sentimental value. Of course, you don't see that during most of the film, but then you find out at the end, John Candy's whole story, and, that has a whole Thanksgiving aspect in itself.
Absolutely, togetherness. But I'll go again. What John Hughes to me as a writer was fantastic on was he was able to he lent a lot of heart. You look at any one of the movies that he wrote and directed, and you got to go a little ways back with John Hughes. He started off as a National Lampoon writer, so National Lampoon magazine, and then he went on and he wrote National Lampoon's Vacation, European Vacation, and even Christmas Vacation, which are really a lot of fun movies. But what makes the zaniness work is that he adds heart to his movies. Even if it's a rated R movie, there's a lot of heart. And, his teen movies, his 16 Candles, his Breakfast Club, again, identifiable. They all have heart. Some Kind of Wonderful, Pretty in Pink, all of these movies that he wrote, the reason why they work is because they have heart. And he was able to nail that. And even when he was writing for adults, he does something, in my opinion, that's genius in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You said when we were talking before we started is that John Hughes, that's Steve Martin. Neal Page was your identifiable character at the beginning, right?
Yes. I would say that I, especially in traveling, I'm quick to annoyance.
But who here hasn't been part of that, where you've been on an airplane, a bus, or whatever, and you get to the airport and you just want to sort of kind of be left alone, right? And then the Del Griffiths pops up, and you sort of kind of feel Steve Martin's pain. You identify with him. So, but then something really fascinating happens. They get to the first stop, their hotel room, and Neal Page just has had it. He's at his breaking point, and he goes off on Del Griffiths. And then something really crazy happens. Your identifiability leaps from Steve Martin to John Candy, to Del Griffiths, because when you talk about heart, that monologue that he says, he goes, you can make fun of me. He goes, go ahead. I'm an easy target. He goes, but I like me. My wife likes me. My customers like me. And all of a sudden, you feel like Neal Page. You feel really bad. And then you identify with Del Griffiths. And then now you're identifying with two characters that you're going to be on the rest of this journey with. Mm-hmm. And it makes the movie that much more heartwarming when you get to the end. And it makes that relationship grow. And all of this happens within like 15 minutes of the movie. Mm-hmm. And we talk about brevity. All of this happens. Everything happens very fast. But, you already know your characters. And you know where they're coming from. And that's the genius of John Hughes. Mm-hmm. Did anybody feel the same way? Like in that scene?
I did, especially because the point that you made that it does come so quickly. Like so much of this movie, it's like, from location to location to location, you're jumping around, but to build the relationships and the character relationships and the character while moving so fast between place to place is crazy. And I mean, just to think that this was so much longer and there was so much other footage, it always makes me curious what was in there, because I did get so much out of these characters. I did feel connected to them in the very short time that we had.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if anybody else, but I remember watching it in the theaters. God, it was in Revere, Massachusetts, at a Showcase Cinemas where I saw this. But even when you get to the end, you're sort of kind of like, oh, I want a little more. I want to watch them sit and have that dinner. I want to see that conversation. And so that worked. You're right. I mean, you really love these. Pardon me, you really love these characters. Hello!
And we also have one of our main hosts here, John Comerford, slipping into this podcast. Hello, John. And we're situated onto the couch.
I don't know if my mic on?
It is now.
Well, you cannot believe what I've been through to get here.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
I was grounded. I got rerouted to Wichita. I ended up with my arm caught between two pillows, so that's right.
Yes.
I apologize for my.
Let's hope they weren't a Demetri's pillows.
Hey, easy on my pillows.
But again, so right now, John, we're talking about how we can identify with these characters. And we were just talking about Neal going off on Del for the first time, and we can see even in the first 15-20 minutes before the lead up to that, the first shot we see of Neal at the very beginning, he's already impatient. He's pointing at his watch. You can see he has a destination, he has a deadline to get to. Sure. And then so his impatience and all the things that are happening that just like deter him from his one end goal to get back home on time. You tripping over Del's trunk, being chasing down taxis by Kevin Bacon, which was a nice cameo, especially around that time when Kevin was having Footloose come out and all that. Just so like all these situations. What?
That was off Quicksilver.
Yeah, it was actually a riff off that, and he just finished filming She's Having a Baby with John Hughes. But again, going back to that, right? I think we may have all been in a situation where we have to catch something to get somewhere, and somebody's holding us up. And so, right? I mean, something is holding us up from getting there, and we have that, and you're looking at the watch, and immediately Neal Page becomes identifiable. And you're like, oh, because it's Thanksgiving, he wants to get home. And, it's, again, he instantly, and nothing is going right for this guy. Tripping over a thing, racing with this yuppie that, he couldn't get the cab. His cab gets stolen, and you're like, oh, Jesus, this, it's a comedic tragedy of events, comic tragedy of events. But, and again, when we finally reach that hotel room, at first you can be sort of kind of annoyed at Del Griffiths for chatting and taking off his socks. Woo, my dogs are barking today. But then in that one fell swoop, and the way that the scene is written and performed by John Candy, that relatability, then you relate with John Candy and you sympathize with him. And now you've got two characters on board that you got to follow through. And I think that was the genius of both performance. That's where screenwriting and performance really, shine. It's a little bit of 87 movies magic.
I agree. The acting's so on par with both of these characters because it is a really easy storyline to follow and not much going on. So, but having these two different, completely foils to each other, from Neal, who's a very conservative, straight-laced, straight-A kind of guy, who's very, timely. He's very organized, as you can see. And then we see Del, who's very outgoing, that extroverts and is full of energy and optimism. And then he's also kind of a mess because we saw that hotel room. He just took over that bathroom like crazy. So having these two completely different people literally forced together for 3 days, it was fun to watch and see how they balance off of each other.
They were a great odd couple.
Except for they do have the commonality of loving their families,
Correct.
which brings us into why this does, as you said, become a good Thanksgiving movie, because they do carry that line through the story. They have this love of their wives and this want to be with family or friends. And so carrying that love despite all of their differences of their situations, financial, personality, everything else, they do have that in common. And they bond about it, like about 3 times
Absolutely,
in the movie.
they bond through their love of family. Absolutely.
Yeah. John, what did you think of these two paired together?
Well, it's classic. I mean, John Hughes obviously, pardon the term, stole from the best. I mean, you always put opposites attract, and because there's a conflict and that creates the drama. I gotta say though that first third of it, it was driving me crazy. I almost wanted to stop because it was just too much an annoyance for me. I didn't see it when it first came out. I don't know if we had talked about that.
We did.
Okay. I did not see it when it first came out. Just didn't get a chance to see it. So as I was watching it, I was because first of all, I
started viscerally affecting you.
Hollywood traffic. I hate all that nonsense. So I was reluctant to watch it at all because it drives me crazy. I can't wait for teleporters so I don't have to go through all that. So I was so with wanting to turn it off, but I didn't when you were saying relate to. I didn't relate to Neal. Only I did in the sense that this guy, this bore who comes into my life is making my life living hell because of who he is and I can't get home. But then he was so mean in that scene that we were just talking about that I went, I can't see somebody be this mean right now. I just couldn't. But obviously the movie won me over towards the end because you got to see why he was being like he was. But anyway, to answer your question, I didn't relate to either of them, and I almost was ready to turn it off. But I just kept sticking it out because I trusted John Hughes and I trusted these performers. So that's why I hung with it and was pleasantly surprised that I did and was rewarded for that patience.
Yeah.
Well, for my money, I mean, what really works is at the core of this, it's compassion, right? Yeah. Because it's so easy to identify with Steve Martin's character because why? We all get, quite easily annoyed, more so in today's day and age, and we don't have necessarily compassion for other people. And ultimately, as the movie goes on, yes, they're annoyed with each other, and it kind of grows and grows. But at the end of it, they get to know each other, and it's like, okay, well, this guy's this way because, you know what? His wife died, and he really doesn't have anybody else, but we never stop and think about that because it's me first. And I think that's the point of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I knew I'd just hang with it because you're in the hands of a skillful person writing it.
And I have to say too, because like I said, I do remember the first time seeing this movie, and I saw it with my best friend Rick, and it was like the movie's 26 years old in 3 days, November 25th, and the twist. So you have this Del Griffiths, who's a force of nature, and you're right. And what's great about him, he has friends everywhere. Oh, I have a friend at this hotel. Oh, I have a friend at this airport. He owes me a favor. I have a friend at this. Oh, he owns a truck and whatnot. And that's fantastic. But, when you're building up to it, instantly you're able to, and John Hughes does it so skillfully, he has the picture of his wife. Mm-hmm. But, he loves his wife. He has a picture of it. And it's not till a little bit later on, probably when they get to that moose-type lodge, and he can't get a hotel room, and he's out in the car, and he has that little monologue where he's talking. Well, Marie, I did it again. I blew it again, and and hopefully I'll see you soon. It sort of clicks right there that, oh, his wife is not with us anymore, and again, I think it's the performance of John Candy, coupled with that writing, that it's a very touching scene, and it just comes off of a very funny scene. He is. Yes. He's just so sweet, but it comes off that scene where they're trying to get the room, and Steve Martin's like, he's like, here's like, I got $47 and a really nice watch, and the guy's like, he goes, well, I have $2 and a Casio. And he does the Casio.
He does like the hand model.
He's like, good night. So, but it's a really funny scene. And then, with him just sitting in the car, it's like he doesn't just take a chair inside the lobby. He goes up to that car with his parka, and he's having that touching moment talking to his wife. And then, of course, when Steve Martin opens the door, he's like, Del, there were 2 beds in that room. They don't have to worry about the pillows.
Not like the first hotel room. Right. There was only 1 bed.
So, again, I think it's just the strength of performance, and I do think it's a strength of John Hughes' writing, where he's able to make that work. We're in today, we talk about, we were talking a little bit about brevity. The movie's 90 minutes long. Right. Uh-huh. And, you look at a Judd Apatow movie, comedy. Those movies, 2.5 hours. You don't need,
because he doesn't believe in editing.
Right. Yeah, and you don't. A comedy doesn't necessarily, unless it's a mad world, and that's the only comedy that I can think of that's like 3 hours plus long. You don't need to be that long. And Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is in. It's out. It sets the pins up very early on, and then you're off to the races. And by the end, you're like, wow, okay. And just the way that it ends, you wonder, is this a Neal Page movie or is this Del Griffith's movie? Because we start with Neal Page.
No, now they're one big happy family, so there's neither movie. Goodness. Come on, that's obviously how it ends.
But yeah, I give it to the pacing, because look at all the places that we've been to in 90 minutes. We start off with New York, then we go to Kansas, then we go to St. Louis, and then to Chicago. And that's all within a whole 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
And just goes to show the pace of, even though it's slow traveling technically, but it's really fast traveling in a movie.
There's no fat on that film.
Well, besides John Candy, but other than that,
isn't that nice?
You can make fun of him all you want.
John, I love you still. He just called you fat.
Don't mind.
Oh, like he doesn't. He had a career because he was fat, for crying out loud.
No, but I say, it's funny that you brought that up, because I was thinking about that. John Candy, to me, who was the guy that used to be on Saturday Night Live? Chris Farley. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He had a career because he was fat. I don't think that he was close to the talent that John Candy was. John Candy could play sympathetic, but he didn't have to rely on his girth to be a comedian, to be funny, to be sympathetic. He really was, like, you got that sweetness from him, where I think like a Chris Farley, his skits and whatnot work because he was overweight. Like, if he was a skinny guy, that stuff wouldn't be funny, period.
I don't think it was just girth and weight also. I think it was just they both, Farley and John Candy, they both have outgoing personalities, which everyone can really get along with, and they can enjoy that kind of presence.
Yeah, I put Candy in a much different... I put him in a different class than Chris Farley. I think that Candy is a much more talented... I think he was a much more talented actor, And
let's also realize that Chris Farley died way too soon, and we didn't see the body of work.
So did John Candy.
Yeah, but we didn't see the body of work that he could have. I'm just making these. John Candy was around a lot longer than Chris Farley. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And he grew into that. He wasn't the greatest of actor when he started out. He was the fat funny guy. That's what he was. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. He was great at it. And he became a much better actor the more and more he did these things.
I debate about that.
We can't be sure how Chris Farley would have been had he been able to be around longer. We don't know.
Perhaps, yeah. No, we don't. But we do know. Again, we grew up at least I grew up with two television shows in the 70s. They were Saturday Night Live and then Second City Television. So, you
Wait,
know,
you didn't have any others?
Huh?
You didn't have any others?
No, well, I'm talking about comedians. Like, 'cause,
Oh.
you know, I grew up with like John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd. I grew up with that troupe, and then watching Second City Television, which was sort of like it was the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live, where you had John Candy and you had Eugene Levy, Martin Short, and you know, you had the Canadian
Back Bacon Boys,
the Back Bacon, right? And you know, so. These people I sort of kind of grew up with, and when they started to get into movies like a John Belushi and John Candy, you know, you took notice. And you know, John Candy was smart. He picked some good roles, and again, I'll go back to John Hughes and his writing. John Hughes was able to write for certain people just wonderfully, and I had three come to mind: Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall, and John Candy. When those actresses were in his movies, that's when they really shined.
They blew up.
They blew up. And he loved to work with them. And, you know, but Candy was one of those actors too. I mean, because Uncle Buck's a great movie.
Great movie.
Great movie. And you love that movie because of Uncle Buck.
See, and I grew up with John Candy movies, and my dad's into John Candy as well, and I watched a bunch of movies with my father. This is tradition every year with my dad, and we always watch this movie over and over again, so shout out to my dad.
That's awesome.
And so
Hi,
I grew up with John Candy movies like Home Alone, Uncle Buck, and even The Great Outdoors. This
Great Outdoors.
Classic movie, which is another John Hughes film. So I just grew up loving John Candy and that outgoing personality, because it does remind me of my dad. So
yeah. And, you know, again, I remember John Candy, one of his first movies, it may have been his first, I'm not sure, but he played Tom Hanks' brother in Splash. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he was great in that. He had one of the best lines ever, like when they were on like the Cape Cod cruise boat, John Candy used to like throw change down. He used to throw change in the boat so that the women would like, it would like go to bend over to pick it up, and then he'd look up their dresses. So they had a flashback as kids, and then when he's older, he's still doing it. And Tom Hanks is like going, "You're still doing that?" He goes, "Hey, when I find something that works, I stick with it." And it's just a great line. So yeah, growing up with John Candy, when he passed away, for me it was one of those sad passings.
It was a really sad time.
Yeah.
And also Steve Martin had a big career back then. I mean, he still does, but back then as well with you know, The Father of the Bride, and around that time, which was more
The
the
Jerk,
90s. But
Man
The Jerk,
with Two Brains,
exactly.
Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid,
And
Roxanne, the same year.
Roxanne.
Exactly. And Steve Martin had a hard time with John's passing as well.
Yeah, and actually Phil's one of Phil's favorite movies, The Lonely Guy, was a really good.
I didn't know that film.
It's an amazing movie.
It's
Definitely
a
check
good
it out.
movie.
It doesn't get the recognition it deserves.
I agree wholeheartedly.
But actually, you know, you brought up, you know, we keep going back to the writing, and so I want to go back to that writing in the sense of John Hughes. Later in his career, he wrote under an alias.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting to know, and Demetri has introduced me to it, that he wrote a script, but it was bad, and then because of it, he wanted to do this. He didn't want to be known under his name of John Hughes. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that?
Yeah, it was basically, it was coming towards. He was having a hard time in Hollywood, and he wasn't really liking the way, you know, he just wasn't liking the whole politics of it all, and he sort of kind of retired. He sort of kind of took himself out of it, and he moved himself back to Chicago, and he actually bought a farm. And he became a farmer. He like literally lived off the land. But
can't really have a farm in Chicago.
It was out in the burbs.
Well, it's outside.
It was outside, and but he still needed to make some money, and so he wrote under, which I find is funny, Edmond Dantes, which is a nod to the Count of Monte Cristo,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, so he wrote movies like Beethoven, you know, he wrote the sequels.
1 and 2,
and
3, I think.
3.
Yeah, and you know, he was just writing these not great movies, but just to make a buck. But he stopped directing, and you know, he just got out of the business altogether, which is sad. You know, I was always hoping that we were going to get one more. His last movie that he wrote and directed himself was Curly Sue, and I always thought that's not exactly the highlight to go out on. And I always thought that, you know, he could. I was always hoping that he would come back and, you know, give us one more movie. But it was never meant to be for us.
I mean, what is symbolically the name Edmond Dantes? I mean, can we say Count of Monte Cristo? But for those of you unfamiliar with the work, it's a story about revenge.
Yep.
Exactly.
Which is interesting to know. And I mean, I guess in that sense, you could say, did he get his revenge or did he not?
Well, again, we won't know that because he died before he could. Yeah, unfortunately. But what's more interesting to me about that story is that he's so obviously a Midwestern guy.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
obviously everything he sets is in Chicago or Midwest.
It's usually the storyline usually takes place in somewhere in Illinois.
Right.
Shermer.
Yeah.
But but that sensibility, which is why I think he had such a hard time in Hollywood, because you just don't swim with the sharks in the Midwest as much. I mean, you have a different sensibility. Even the people who are peppered in this movie, he so has appreciation for the people who live in the Midwest and the kind of people there, and their sensibilities, their likenesses, those kinds of things. And you can see them throughout all his movies, and I can see why he would not go over well. No, he wouldn't get along well with the entertainment types out here.
Yeah, he would want a farm.
Yeah, now
exactly.
You mentioned the Midwest. I'm actually from Illinois, so I think that's why I relate so much to all of John Hughes' films, because I'm from Illinois. I know what that lifestyle is like, and it appeals to me as a person. But I figured with the sentimentality of all of his movies, that appeals to everyone else. But storyline and the locations that all these stories take place in is in Illinois, it's in the Midwest. It's such a relatable lifestyle for me. That's why I enjoy John Hughes films.
Yeah, and I think to your point about him being not the Hollywood mold, I mean, he wrote very unorthodoxly as well. He was known as being one of the fastest writers.
Crank it out.
He would write.
He took what, 3 days?
3 days apparently.
For a lot of for this one or whatever.
For this one, it was like 3 days, but it was literally days that it would take him to write a script. And what I love.
That's just the draft. That doesn't mean he doesn't do rewrites.
But an interesting thing.
To get the first one down.
Right.
An interesting thing, his storylines usually in most movies only take place over a few days.
Right.
So that might be another reason why.
Yeah, and it's just great because he'll get the idea in his head, and then he goes and writes. And what I found fascinating is after he writes it, he literally reads it. He would have read it out loud to himself to make sure he had the dialogue right. And he did capture the dialogue of the time, of the kids, of the adults. He had a great ear for dialogue, and I mean that to me is so the anti what we consider today, because it can take so long to bang out a script. Yeah. Another great story of his.
Phil, can you attest to that?
Yeah, I've been writing mine for 10 years.
Exactly. The other thing I found fascinating about that is he would be on, if there was and I can't remember what film it was, but he tells the story about he was on a film that he wrote and directed. He was having a difficult time getting everything taken care of. It was a really difficult shoot. While that was happening, he's writing another script in 3 to 5 days, getting another one done, saying, "Okay, I'll do that next." So I don't know how you have any time of the day if you're directing a film, but somehow, because it's going so badly, he just says, "I have to do something because I'm going to
write a film,
exactly
maybe even about it."
And I was just going, "How that?" Because I have a hard enough time writing a script when I'm not doing anything else.
Right.
But I think that just goes to show the mind of an artist, because usually creative people have a million projects going on in their head. So I think that just attests to the work that he's able to do.
And keep artists in the back of your head for a second, because like a story that's similar to yours is he was working on Breakfast Club. And Breakfast Club, he thought, okay, I'm going to make Breakfast Club. He already had it all good and done. And he figured the only way he can get it done, it has to be cheap. How do we do this? Oh, detention. Detention at a school, one room. Yeah. Most of it, we're going to feed everybody in this room. It's, and if you watch Breakfast Club, it's primarily in this one room. Well, while doing the casting, he meets Molly Ringwald. And he became so enamored and so inspired. She literally became, in a sense, his muse. He scrapped Breakfast Club and all of a sudden started writing 16 Candles for Molly Ringwald. And that became his first movie. And then he brings her back again in for Breakfast Club. But again, to your point, the mere fact that he could just go, oh my God, Molly,
do a new one.
Yeah. It's an anomaly, man.
And how, geez, and for Molly Ringwald at that age too. Oh my head! It's like, oh, he's writing this movie for me, and her career is owed to John.
So is Anthony Michael Hall's. I mean,
exactly.
They go.
But see, Anthony Michael Hall didn't play it smart. He started arguing with him, and he was out. You know, which is, again, too bad because Anthony Michael Hall with John Hughes worked great. And, you know, I love Weird Science. You know, I love, you know, yeah, it's a great movie.
Breakfast Club.
Breakfast
That's
Club's
the one that
good
takes
too.
the cake for me. It's always Breakfast Club.
Yeah,
It's
and
in our
I love it so much I
intro.
put it in our intro.
another rated R movie too, by the way. And you know, when people look at Breakfast Club or think of Breakfast Club, you know, the Anthony Michael Hall character. I was thinking about this as I was driving in. You know, it's a pretty dark. Breakfast Club has its dark moments, and
definitely.
you know that particular character. You know, he's in detention because he brought a gun to school, and at that time, those kind of shootings weren't as relevant as they are today. But he didn't bring it in to mow people down. He brought it in because he was going to commit suicide. He just couldn't take that character couldn't take the pressure that his parents and life was putting on him.
But
and
the,
when that
the
comes out in the
relatable
movie-
aspects
Right.
of all teenagers
Absolutely.
and adults.
Yeah, and John Hughes just got it. And he was able to put it down on paper, write it in 3 days.
And that's what John was so good at, to have all these basic storylines that anyone could really relate to here and there. And for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, that basic concept of dealing with that public traffic, especially during holidays. And that's fun to watch.
You guys already discussed that how he wrote that or why he wrote it, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
about him.
Yes.
Yeah, about him being waylaid.
Yeah.
You know, from Chicago or from New York to Chicago.
So, and I've actually been fortunate enough to have good experiences at airports, knock on wood, because I'll be flying fairly soon. But just having the frustration of traveling and literally going from planes to a train. Trains are fun, actually, and automobiles. Everyone has to go through that at least once in their life.
Yeah, Cami, didn't you get stuck with the big fat dog?
What?
Yes, I did on the airline once. They were trying to get a
catch
dog
this
about
story.
300 pounds trying to get on the airline.
You're kidding.
I mean, it was a massive dog.
Wow.
And they had like 4 people picking him up, trying to get him, laying over. The owner, this lady, had purchased 3 seats, the whole one row for this dog. But because he was so massive, they picked him up. He didn't even fit in the row. So they take him back out, and she said, well, let him just lie, in front of the exit door. And they said, this is a hazard.
Yeah, you can't.
And after about 30 minutes, they said, we've got to take off. So you've got to take the dog out. And you're going to have to rent a van or something and move him.
I'm still waiting for the punchline. This sounds like a joke.
I don't know what happened. They did take her and the
Wow.
dog off, and they said, hey, maybe just rent a van and take him where you need to go.
Or a semi.
Or a semi.
God.
Yes. See, and I think that's why you fall in love with this movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because at first you see Neal's character, and if it were any of us that's obviously had some kind of tragedy in traveling, you're just, when you see John Candy come in, you're just like, if this were me, I would dump him. I wouldn't keep going on and on. I would just like get rid of him. And then the first scene when it comes to the hotel and you see that he really is a person and he has a heart, then you start falling in love with him. So that's why you identify with both characters. You understand Steve Martin's frustrations and think, if that were me, could I deal with this guy? And if it were real, I would just want to dump him. And then you realize you're pulling for him, and you're saying, to Steve Martin's character, quickly love this guy like we're loving him as we're watching him, so he can stay with you somehow. You want them to end up together.
Yeah.
Well, for Steve Martin, I think in terms of him as an actor, and again, it's a combination of the writing, but I think it's choices by Steve Martin. He almost plays the camera a little bit. You know what I mean? Anytime something happens, like remember he pulls out he's drying his face and he thinks it's towel, but it's not a towel, right? He almost does that look almost into camera, saying, "Hey, you guys get it. You can laugh." Yeah. And I think that's a classic of the time to an extent, right? But also Steve Martin in general.
It's part of his acting persona. I mean, he's mastered the frustrated shock look. It's a reoccurring theme in his acting. That is one of his prime skills. He can be really frustrated and really shocked simultaneously all the time. Actually, just mentioning Steve Martin, acting-wise, he just got an honorary Academy Award at the Governor's Award, and he made a speech, and he did mention this movie. He did thank John Hughes, and this is where he was actually the one who said that I think the original script was like 165 pages.
Yeah.
3 hours long. That's
3
what I
hours.
cut.
3 hours long, and he was like, "What are we cutting?" And John Hughes seemed a little resistant, but obviously that went through.
Did he say it was one of his favorites at some point?
He has.
He did,
He has
okay.
said this is one of his favorite films, which is great because he's made tons, and he's also a writer as well as an actor.
A musician.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Steve Martin's career, it goes back to Disney.
Did
Go
you
ahead.
guys also read that one of the reasons why he chose to do the film was because of the tirade?
Yeah.
Okay.
The tirade.
I just
tirade.
learned that recently. I didn't know.
Yeah, it was the rental car tirade and the scene with the two
And
of
if
them
not
in
for
the
that scene,
car.
it probably would have been a PG movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely.
It's actually this movie is actually PG in a few countries.
Really?
That besides U.S. because
Which-
U.S. has that limit of how many swear
How many you can
words
say? You
can
can't say
have.
18? You
You
can't?
can't say
No,
18 in,
it's not.
in
one,
one
one
minute. No.
time, one time, and it needs to be R. But I'm wondering because it is 26 years old, what would the rating be today on that? Because I do think it's
only
a good
because
film.
of that F-bomb.
No, if
Yeah.
if
you
it were
can-
today, they would have the studio would have come down and the writer director and say take that scene out. They would have said take it
Or
out.
would they would have just
Oh,
kept it
they-
in there, but
They
edit
wouldn't have
it,
kept
right?
it in. No,
Take out
they would have maybe had him say something else, or they just take it out completely.
so they wouldn't give it a PG-13.
They no to
The
give it a
rating,
PG-13.
The rating would be an R because of
It would
the
be a rated
number.
R.
And I
It's
almost
still-
find it sad that it's rated R because I think it's
Exactly.
such a family
That's
film.
my point.
I think this is where you want to sit down with your children
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving. It has a great meaning. And again, when we were just watching this, I let all the kids watch it. And it was just that one scene,
Yeah.
right? But it had to be in there to really give you the feeling of, because as you said too, you were ready to just shut it off because you're
Yeah.
so frustrated he's even putting up with this. So they needed that in there to give the audience the
release.
frustration.
The
and
release.
yes,
Such
and the
a
relief.
memorable
Exactly.
scene
Yeah.
in general.
It is a release because when I was a kid watching this, my parents always said, "All right, leave the room for about 2 minutes," and then I finally understood why once I was older. But after the scene, after his whole tirade and the F-bombs and stuff, and the next time he's with Dell, you can see him finally like accept everything that's going on, and and it's actually warms up and open and more welcoming to Dell after just like letting it all go.
Yeah. And you have to, again, I'll take it, again, because I do remember, okay, back in 1987, R wasn't the taboo that it sort of kind of is today. Like, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing to release
weren't
an R-rated
Going
movie.
for the tweens as much. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
exactly.
Yeah.
But movies were still, movies still made money. A
absolutely.
lot of money is being R. But that one scene was so, because of that frustration, it was so riotous in the theater. It's just one of those things where the theater was roaring, to my recollection, because he just went off. And I'm going to say it, that scene is not only great because of his performance, but it's funny because of the word fuck. I mean, that is a it's a funny word in the way in which he says it, and he mouths it and makes sure that it's enunciated.
Yeah.
Choose
It
that.
also helps when
caramel.
you're saying it to Edie McClure.
Oh,
exactly.
Cherubic face. And
Yeah.
it's just
I was just gonna say
horrible.
the person he's ranting to, like such another bubbly extrovert kind of person who's kind of
And Phil and I were
still,
talking. Yeah.
having fun with everyone.
I hate those
They're
effing
right.
people because you have a job to do.
Yeah, and she's talking on the phone.
and she's
with
talking about
Thanksgiving plans.
Thanksgiving, what she's gonna do. He's even more frustrated, and I think that's why it comes out. It was icing on the cake for him. I can't take
but
it.
we've all, in a sense, we've all been there when it comes to customer service, whether it's a rental car, whether we're trying to make an exchange at Best Buy or something, and that person is on the phone or the cashier is like not paying attention to you, and you're like, and Phil and I were talking about this. Again, very relatable. And we've all been in a situation.
We've all wanted to say that.
We've all wanted to.
But we've all wanted.
Correct. But we've been in that situation, one way, shape, or form.
And I think at the ending of all of that, it was such a payoff with that clerk saying, "You're fucked." So it just goes to show how contagious Neal's attitude is. He brings out the worst in people. Even this happy-go-lucky clerk person who was just happy 2 minutes ago, and after that gets to the point where she says that to him. And
She gets the ultimate revenge.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I'll go back to John Hughes' writing. He knew how to set up a joke and a punchline. And that scene is a joke. And it's a punch. I mean, there's the
But don't you
punchline.
find it fascinating, going to Cami's point, that would they make that, or how would they rate that this day? Because the idea that that one scene would take your movie from a PG to an R, and the money you would lose today by doing so, or not even be able to because the studio wouldn't let you because of the money you would lose, is kind of shocking to me. That it's so silly in a sense, because that in context it's hysterical and should be acceptable. And even though you were sent out of the room, Cami, were you okay with having everybody see it?
I hit mute for that 1 minute,
okay.
but it's only because my 10-year-old was in there.
But if your 15-year-old was there,
Yeah, they were. Yeah, the 13 and 14-year-old were there, but I hit mute for the 10-year-old. But they were so into the movie, they kept saying, "Okay, take it off mute. Take it off mute." It was a long minute. But
the scene itself is a minute. It's like a mute for a minute.
It's a long minute, but they're all sitting there reading the lips because it's so clear and precise.
Exactly.
And you're like,
And the question is, had the 10-year-old not been in the room, would you have muted it?
Probably not. I mean, I do think PG-13 is a good rating from that scene.
Too,
but the other thing is, I do think it's a family film. Again, I'm going back to that. So I hate for the children to miss out, and really that was the only scene I feel that might be a little, for not underage children.
It is the only scene that you would have to be concerned about.
Well, but you say a family film, so you had no problem with going, okay, you want me to? I'll point out one of your problems. You scratch your balls. You scratch your balls. You have more balls.
Hey, what 10-year-old isn't doing that anyway?
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah. I had no problem with scratching the balls.
You know what I need?
My boy. Yeah,
An
I
extra
think
pair
my
of
boys.
balls.
Yeah, she has 3 boys.
I have 3 boys.
Yeah, she doesn't have a problem with it.
No, and my husband, and they're all scratching their balls.
There you
go. I have no problem.
Hey,
with
speaking
that.
of which, Demetri, put your hands on the table, please. So.
But there.
He found some pillows.
Yes,
Pillows.
but yes, exactly. There were a lot of great moments just for the adults who are watching this. It was that ode to the adults so they can enjoy this movie. The whole tirade, and even the hotel when they both bake up together, and those aren't pillows.
Those are how about the Bears?
How about the Bears game? And again, like
great.
Illinois humor.
Yeah.
The football is like, oh yeah, it's just after just that manly be like,
Oh.
just shake it off.
They're gonna
shake
make it into the playoffs. Just walk.
So yeah,
That was
a lot of
great.
great adult moments.
Yeah, again, to me there was nothing. There's nothing offensive about that movie.
No.
And again, you have that minute.
Just when he takes his shoes and socks off. That's offensive.
my God, that was like
It's very offensive.
Or he's washing his face with them, right?
Yeah,
Actually, there's a lot of offensive things in this movie.
but I'm saying
Maybe not rating wise, but
again, if we compare this to like a Hangover. Right? I mean, this movie.
Well, yeah, but you're talking 20 years later. Everybody has to push the envelope like crazy.
No, I understand, and that's why going back like 1987 and a little later, I really want to talk about the differences of movies and grosses and release patterns. But yeah, in 1987, to come up with it wasn't too much of a shock that this movie was rated R, and and for a good reason. And today. The movie with that scene in it is still rated R because of the amount of fucks in there. But today, executives they wouldn't allow it. No. They would say, take it out. No, and I think that would be one of the things that would have frustrated John Hughes to no end because he knows that scene works. And
Steve Martin wouldn't have done the movie.
He wouldn't have done the movie. He wouldn't have done the movie.
I think that's great. I'll do it if you keep that in.
Yeah.
So and you might need star power like that at the time to have it.
It'd be a completely different movie if Steve Martin wasn't in it.
Yeah. I think if either one of them, I don't know if either one of them weren't in that movie, I'm not sure, who you could have replaced them with. So in that scene alone too, it's like, I wonder though today if you got comparable.
See Aykroyd and Belushi in it. That would have been interesting.
That would have been Yeah, it would have been.
Also big names back in that time as well.
Well, who today? Like, if you were to make that movie today, right?
Well, they did. It's called Due Date.
It's called...
yeah, and that's what
you know what? You're
that's
right.
What I said. I was like, this
that
is
movie was horrible.
It was terrible.
Awful.
I watched Due Date, and
that
I
movie
was
made me
so
angry.
upset because I am so in love with this film. I'm like, that was a complete ripoff, and then you modernized it to today's society, and I just didn't care for it.
You didn't? Well, more to the point, you didn't care for any of those characters.
Yeah.
There was nothing relatable. Robert Downey Jr.'s character was so mean, and he never really changed. And Zach Galifianakis' character was so annoying. Like, again, there was no unrelatable. It went on for way too long. And I think that was
Judd direct that one?
he might. It was. I think it was one of his. He may have produced
Colleagues?
it
I don't know.
or something, or it was directed. Yeah, I think he had a hand in there, but it was not a good movie at all. Made me angry.
Todd
it made
Phillips
me.
directed it.
Todd Phillips.
There you go.
It made me angry watching
Thank
that
you.
movie. And I'm
That's
like,
what
there
the
you go.
computer's here for.
Okay.
Nice.
yes, thank you, Sarah. But all right, so let's try to get into some of the cinematography. We know the storyline takes place from New York, mostly in Illinois, but they shot some places in Illinois, like Kankakee and Gurney, and some hotels.
In California.
And the interior studios.
Well, a lot of the highway shots.
The highway
Some of
shots were in California.
Yeah, and I believe they also shot in New York as well, the outside. And I was watching this movie again a couple days ago, and I'm like, that is so what Illinois looks like. Because I come from the Midwest, like smack dab in Illinois. It's all corn and fields, and being on a highway for miles and miles. That's all you get is land. It's like there's nothing.
Well, I think there's a shot too of the St. Louis airport when they're there. Isn't that's actually
Yes, that's true.
in St. Louis a little bit there?
And
When they're on the
there's the
bus
shot
sometime.
with the airplane flying in the sky.
Right.
I went, wait a minute. Wait, I know that. What is that from? And I found out later what it was
How
from.
does it Yeah, they stole it from another movie.
Yeah, they stole
correct?
from Airplane.
Airplane.
It was great.
Oh.
Well, I thought it was interesting just how
I love
when
that.
approaching like companies to do this film,
Yeah.
no one would do
Nobody
it
would
because
do
they
it.
were like, no, this is bad publicity. So they had to rent all their own rental cars. They couldn't use a rental car company. They couldn't use a plane company. They had to do
Crazy.
all of this stuff themselves and spend so much of their budget on just that
Yeah.
alone because everyone's like, no, this is bad
This
PR.
This makes us look bad, yeah.
But I can understand that when you're having a tirade against one of the rental car employees, no one would probably want to put a name on
See,
that.
if I would run, I'd say, you want? Absolutely, we're in. What do you want?
Free
What do you want?
advertisement.
And not only that, but you could
promotion.
say, if you want us to do it, help us out here, because you don't have to look like the bad guy the entire time,
Right.
because they don't really, because when he goes off on it, she doesn't
Yeah.
look like a bad.
And in the
She's just
situations,
annoying.
like in the
Yeah.
flights and everything, it's not their fault. It's all blamed on the
Yeah.
weather.
Well,
it's
yeah.
not
Well,
Compton.
I would have said yes.
Speaking of
absolutely.
which, okay, Ferris Bueller's teacher there.
Yeah.
What's that guy's name?
Ben Stein's
Ben
the
Stein.
actor.
Okay,
The
so
actor.
Ben Stein at the
A lot of
airport.
cameos.
Bueller.
Yeah, cameos.
Okay,
Destination
so
Nowhere.
yeah, Destination
Yep.
Nowhere. That's awesome. You know, all the flights are canceled, and then he smiles.
Yeah.
He's like, "You're stuck here." But I just love in the background it says Destination Nowhere. So, yeah,
This
it's
is where this
awesome.
film is going.
Yep.
Who knows?
You know, and speaking of cinematography, I mean, the guy that was the DP, the cinematographer on this, his name is Donald Peterman. And this guy had been around, and in fact, he did Addams Family Values. I don't know, Phil. I know you're a big Addams Family fan.
Heck yeah.
All right,
Keeping it PG.
keeping it PG. Yeah, and he also, you know, there are some Star Trek connections here. He also did Star Trek for The Voyage Home, and he also did Cocoon, Splash. We talked about Splash. I mean, this guy's been around. He did Men in Black, Get Shorty. You know, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
It's a big
So
big
he's worked,
resume.
and he's worked with good directors throughout. And you know, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles does have a look.
Yes,
to
it
it.
does.
And again, looks that are, like you said, that's Illinois, and you can point that out.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because I just come from there and I just know what Illinois looks like. It's all landmass. If there's Chicago, then cornfields. That's it. Because that's it. But I gotta admit the what was I gonna say? The interior shots and whatnot. I believe because of the weather locations that they were waiting out the weather just so it can have more snow and stuff. But so they shot a lot of the hotel scenes together. It was fun, like literally the small cramped areas, and then having
Right.
these two big, loud, boisterous guys together in the
Yeah.
same room
Yeah.
really added to the movie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the home that Neal Page lived in, I believe, it was an interesting story about that because they actually built that on a set, and it cost, you know, and John Hughes wanted I want the home. And apparently it cost then $100,000, but apparently Paramount was really upset.
Yeah, I
pissed.
can't see why. I mean,
Yeah.
$100,000 was something that you shoot a couple of scenes.
Well,
in.
but
I'm
don't
guessing
but
that's
don't
where like all of
forget.
our extra footage was.
Yeah, don't
Right.
forget the movie at that point. There had been a lot of film, so they were probably going, "What for a comedy? 3 hours? What?" So
But the funny thing is the situations that they're always they're literally right next to each other, stuck
Yeah.
together in
Yeah.
cars, in buses, in
Trains.
hotel rooms, and trains. Like they're literally shoulder to shoulder constantly. They can't separate, even though Neal tries to get
And then
rid
they
of Del
also
a few
they have the
times.
big trunk
the big trunk
that
Oh,
they're
yeah.
always they got to carry. They get off the train, and
It's a
you know.
metaphor for all the baggage we carry.
Exactly.
around.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. We never
Yeah, we
know
never
what's
know.
inside.
Yeah.
You know,
Almost-
but we know that
Yeah.
it's heavy.
But
We know it's
Obviously, it was shower curtain rings.
Shower
Our
curtain.
curtain
Oh,
rings. That was
This is-
great.
What else could it have been?
Well,
That's
to
how he
his
made all
right,
those
'cause he has no
friends.
home.
That's
Right,
exactly.
yeah.
This is
He
the
sold all
autograph-
those earrings. I mean,
the autographed Walter Cronkite
awesome.
edition. I'm
Yes.
like, where's the autograph?
There's something from like the Emperor of China
Emperor.
or something.
In the montage when Del's
awesome.
selling all those rings and even to the
This one's filled with
the three
helium.
girls, yeah, to the three teenagers, like you could pass for 18,
Yeah, it
19.
makes you look older.
They just
Yeah.
hand over
Hand
that
over the
money.
money.
I'm like, oh, they're so smart and such a business salesman.
Yeah.
And he uses his personality to even gain more friends.
Right.
And everywhere he goes.
Absolutely.
That was the only shocker for me throughout the entire movie. I was so convinced that he was going to be able to talk himself out of that ticket, or like
Yeah.
talk himself into just getting car. I'm like, he's a great salesman. I believe in him at this point.
I
He
didn't
can
thought
get money
that.
out
I
of
thought eventually
anything.
he was gonna know him. Oh,
Right,
hey,
yeah.
Yeah.
because he knows
Hello,
everybody has
officer.
friends.
What can we help you
The
with?
only shocker of the whole movie.
Yeah.
So I was like, what?
He didn't talk his way out.
How did that happen?
And it's another great John Candy who's like, do you really feel that this car is street legal?
I do.
Yes, I
Yes.
do.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
radio works.
Is the
And even
radio works.
That's all you need.
yeah, even that like crazy because the car is basically useless, but the only thing that works is the radio.
Hey, am I the only one that looked like before the car went through its disarray? I always looked at that car. It looks like a shorter version of the family truckster from Vacation. It had the same wood paneling. It was that green color. I don't know.
I'd have to look it up more. I know that the car in general, they had to do some
was a
adjustments.
mishmash,
Like,
yeah.
they've compiled a few vehicles into
Yeah.
one.
Well, look at you.
Yeah, obviously because there's electronic seat on one side, but the
Oh,
manual
yeah.
seat on the other. How does that happen?
Right.
It happens so that he can get stuck.
Yeah,
And
but
so that they
it's
can
like-
break the seat.
And again, another great scene. You're going the wrong way. How do they know which way we're going? You're right. How do they know which way we're going? Yeah.
And yeah, even Del
Yeah.
Griffith's fun, crazy, and Neal being like, "How did I get stuck with this guy?"
Yeah. And then he's like, yeah, how do they know where we're going? It's just again, the movie's just chock full of comedic gems and scenes and dialogue. That you're right. We don't get this today. It's not that kind of writing. I think that there's not the brevity. They don't. Or sometimes they'll take too much time to build up a character, but not in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. you know.
My question is, do you think had this movie been released the exact same format in today's time, in like present day, like nowadays, or even a few months ago or a few years ago, do you think it would have gained the audience that it did and had that, love for this movie that it did back in the 80s?
I don't think there's a culture for it.
Yeah.
I mean, look what's coming out right now. There's no real Thanksgiving movie. It's Hunger Games. No offense to Hunger Games.
No, yeah, and I think to your point, what you said earlier, part of the charm of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and being stuck like that, there was no technology. You go ahead.
Well, I think that there's obviously some big difference that would change like the plot and make the plot not understandable, which are the like technological elements. I do think it does speak to the fact that so much of society acts kind of more like a Steve Martin character. Like everyone wants an immediacy and to get things right away, and there's a lack of patience. And even in this movie, when you see him and he's talking about, he's proud of his town. There aren't that many people who are proud of your town. I think that message is very like good for people to hear now. So while it might not do good in theaters, I think that would be more because of just time. But I think people will relate to it now if they watch it now.
Well, I also think that this movie has two main characters in the 90 minutes. You don't see a lot. You see, brief interactions here and there with the people along the way, but it's really two main characters. How many movies are released today that you're only going to have two main characters? I mean, that is a little bit difficult to draw an audience in there. Who are you appealing to? And who would play the characters as well? I don't think this movie may have done as well today.
They do a lot of one character movies.
Yeah, you have that one main protagonist that everyone roots
Normally
for.
they're like about to die, but
but folks, I think we
happen.
I think we answered our own question like 5 minutes ago.
What's that?
Due date.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
that's just one. I mean, I absolutely think this movie could be successful this time. It would depend, obviously, on who wrote it and who directed it and who was in it. But, I mean, because you can make anything as long as it was made well. I think you would have an audience for it. Okay, Due date, as you say, was not.
Right.
Yes, Phil?
So Zach Galifianakis, is kind of in that role of John Candy, perhaps. Seth Rogen.
But he doesn't have as broad of an appeal that Candy did. That's my.
I don't think that there's anyone really who fits the John Candy image right now. I can't picture anyone. I think that he's just so lovable.
Yeah.
He's guileless too. He doesn't have really an agenda like everybody else has an edge or an agenda.
Exactly.
He
and
didn't
he's
have
just
that.
so lovable, and I don't know who I can think of that has that right now.
Also, I mean, there's a cartooniness, right? Meaning, well, we haven't talked about it yet, but the sound effects, right? This was before Seinfeld and things like that, and it's reminiscent, obviously, Bueller's Day Off, where these moments are just heightened by just the weirdest things, whether music or an actual sound effect, and you laugh because of it, and we don't get that anymore.
Yeah, no, you're right. And
I agree.
John Hughes used that a lot. When you said sound effect, this just popped into my head was there's a great scene, just like no, there's this great scene in Uncle Buck where there's a party and the drunken clown shows up at the door, and Buck answers the door and he's like, "Hey, you're drunk, you're not going to perform." And then the clown guy goes, "Oh, you can't tell me, you fat flushing sacca." And then Candy just punches him in the nose, and he does that blah, 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 sound effect that, again, only John Hughes would use. And again, that slapstickiness, it works. Like he gets it, and I think it was a product of his growing up. He probably watched those cartoons, obviously.
And those laughs do
come. The sound effects and the music. That goes from transitions from place to location to location. There's that one point when the two are on the bus, and Neal sings Three Coins in a Fountain. No one knows that one, and everyone just looks at him like, "What are you singing?" And then you see Del having that again outgoing personality. He sings Flintstones. Everyone
he knows how to relate.
Yes. Yeah. And then when they're finally in the melted cart singing, they're both singing the same song at the hotel. It just goes to show that at one point they were so different, but now they're on the same level and understanding of each other.
Yeah.
Come on, Neal, you must know a song.
Oh, I was just going to nod to the fact that he does include those slapstick or the very obvious jokes, like him falling over the trunk twice in the same movie, but he makes it funny and keeps it in.
Well, we even have a punch in the face too, without not different sound effect though, but we have that, which is a visual of
right.
That, so.
And of course the cab scene, where he goes to pick him up, because I've never seen anybody be picked up by their testicles before. And he's like, "Oh," and he's talking.
Oh, and his voice
sounds like
his voice
goes on and on.
His voice was classic. It was like he sucked the
helium.
20-pound helium balloon. It was all, but again, charm, hysterical, it works. Yeah, very funny.
And there was another moment when when they're at that first hotel, and then they get picked up by that crazy son.
Right.
And
Oh my
you can
God,
see him
Dylan
he's
Baker's
chewing.
Dylan
amazing.
Baker.
Yeah.
This is great.
You can
That-
see
I
him
thought-
chewing and spitting, even the sound effects.
Right.
And then when Neal
He was
goes to grab his
amazing.
hand, he literally just spit into his hand, and then he's shaking it.
And that's how
even
you
that
got.
added to the
Now I don't know
humor.
if that's the casting, that's Hershenson or Jenkins, or if it's in concert with Hughes. But whoever put it together, the casting was amazing.
It was great.
I thought the cameos were just terrific.
Oh,
Especially
absolutely.
Dylan Baker just killed me.
Dylan Baker was good.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was in it, and I'm seeing them. I'm going, wait a minute.
Dylan Baker.
Oh my God, that's Dylan Baker.
And even his character, he was only in it for a minute, and
Yeah.
then the way he stands and acts, and he calls out his wife.
Yeah.
Get that.
Like, she didn't even cry, and the baby came out
Sideways.
sideways.
Yeah.
So it's just all these different characters that we see in such a short amount of time. It's still fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's and was that was that the truck they're in with the dog?
Yes.
And what's
And they're
great-
frozen.
And again, it's the setup and the punchline.
Yep.
When they get to where they are, they're all frozen, and then he has to cut to the dog, who's also frozen in that growl. It just works.
And Neal didn't have his gloves because he forgot it at the
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, and he goes to grab, and then the dog comes out. That was fun.
Ooh, just missed me, just nipped.
Just a little bit. But again, to add to the humor, the fun music. There were
Yeah.
moments where there was instrumental, and then them actually singing, and then near the end of the movie, we even hear a cover of "Every Time You Go Away." So it just
Yeah.
goes to show like all the different music that they used.
I really loved
throughout
the
this
moment right before we see them in bed together. That music, that transition music, was great because it. I don't know. I don't remember what the song was. I just remember as I was listening to it, I was laughing at the song before I even saw them lying on the bed together. So
Was it
does
the-
anybody remember?
Pulls you in.
That
It-
song?
I honestly don't know. I can't remember. But as it was happening, I was laughing. I better write this down because I'm going to want to talk about it.
Phil, was there a scene?
That you
That-
specifically wanted to study?
No, this is where Sarah loves her. She loves
I mean,
her
I feel
scene
like we've
studies.
kind of talked
studies.
about half
I
the
have one.
scenes. Oh, but
Yeah, John, go.
My when Steve Martin puts it all together. When he's remembering
at the
his
Yeah, the
time
day.
with them, and then he starts to realize, wait a minute, there's more going on here.
There's a very interesting twist in
Yeah.
that montage. You don't expect it
Yeah.
or see it coming.
And why I think it snuck up on the character too. Which
Yeah.
is why I liked it so much. Is because until then he was so hell bent. Neal, I'm talking about the character Neal. Is so hell bent on either getting away or getting home or just trying to get away from this person. He doesn't really see him as a whole complete person that might have a pain in his life or a full experience as a human until he stops and is away from it all and it starts to put it together.
Yeah.
And then he starts to look at it completely differently. And I loved that scene for that reason, is because you could see him come to the realization that, oh my God, this man has nobody. And
Yeah.
I am his only family.
Yeah, exactly. Because during that whole montage scene at the end, at the Blue Line CTA, I know what that's like. I used to take the CTA in Chicago every other day. But yes, that realization, the way that they also edited it.
Absolutely.
At first, you can see Neal's character thinking about his home, being and having that Thanksgiving
Yeah.
food and being with his family, and then going back to his moments with Dell and all the traveling places, and then what Dell's saying. All these little lines that were thrown in throughout the movie that we don't really think about until you put it together.
Yeah.
So it goes from Neal's family to the realization that Dell has no family and no home.
Yeah,
Well,
I haven't been home
and
in
it goes
years.
through the
Yeah.
process of also, oh, now I have a friend. Like, I've officially made a friend. And then the curiosity about his life really comes through.
And what's funny, and I think another strength of the script is the breadcrumbs are laid down for us to figure this out. Because again, there's the scene when they're at the diner, and Dell lets out, "Oh, I haven't been home in years," and he's like, "Seriously?" He goes, "No, it's just a figure of speech." And then the scene where, "Well, Marie, I did it again. You're right. I just talk." I blow it with people and I do too much. And you sort of kind of, and he says, hopefully I'll see you, I'll see you soon. And again, that's a thing that she's no longer with us. And
I just thought they were divorced, to be honest with you, until I learned that she wasn't.
I thought it was very realistic
Yeah.
for John Hughes to, not have him be the one to admit it.
Yeah.
Not for have
Yeah.
him bring that to light.
Right.
Or, because that's something people really do. When they experience tragedy, they don't go blubbering to strangers, especially when he's such a happy persona, like, so that it came through Steve Martin's realization and his character, like, really completing his, like, arc. Right. A very good choice.
But Neal went through, all the transition all along the way. He was frustrated, then he tried to be kind to him. Then he was frustrated, then he was paying for the hotel, doing this back and forth. But at the last scene when they go to that hotel and, he has a little bit of money and a nice watch and the guy takes it and he leaves John Candy on his own and he doesn't have that. Well, then when he looks out the window, sees John Candy sitting in the car, it's just this moment where he really starts to care for him, feel for him, not intentionally wanting to be mean. And then as it goes on, he goes out there. But then the next scene when they're leaving that morning, they're almost in cahoots together now, like bandits trying to get the car that's stranded and they're going back and forth and, ended up going through the hotel room and then taking off. And it was just at that time, I think he realizes that, he's a person and almost loves him on like a brotherly level.
And they had that great bonding scene. Like, where do you want to go now? Oh, there's Mexico in there. Yep, here's a tequila. And they're, when they get drunk together, it's a great, again, it's another great bonding scene that happens. And to your point, Cami, it's when they are in cahoots together at that point. Their mission is to get home.
Yeah. And we can see Neal
created a misdemeanor.
We can see Neal throughout this movie. He has a character arc and growth because he starts as a frustrated person who doesn't want anything to do with him. And then coming back to Del at the end of the movie, he wants to help him out and have a family. Right. So we see that progression in growth in him.
By the end of it, he introduces Del as his friend.
To his family, to his kids, to his wife.
And you can tell, what works too about that scene. The woman who plays the wife, like she was really
Layla Robin.
I mean, she's not in the movie all that much, but she has a great line. It's like, honey, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Del Griffith. She goes, I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Griffiths, or something to that effect.
It's nice to meet you,
nice
Mr.
to meet you,
Griffith. It's just that she greets him as a human.
And the way that, again, that it stops. We start the movie off with Neal Page, but it ends up on a freeze frame of John Candy's smiling Chuberic face, and you just get the warm,
very
fuzzy.
warm.
You get welled up, and it's just like
family.
He has a family.
And I loved how throughout the movie, they cut back to the family every once in a while, just to reinforce the fact that this is his destination. He's wanting to get home. Yeah. So
I'm welling up right now just thinking about it.
Well, that's why I think it's a great holiday film. I think it's a great family film for everyone because it does have a lot of truth and meaning. You're frustrated every day on certain levels, but do we take the time out to really, care for others and get to know them? And it was really heartwarming at the end.
Yes.
That's why I wish I would have loved to have been at that dinner. I would have loved to have been at that Thanksgiving dinner.
Everyone would just have a whole new set of shower rings.
That would be
That's what would happen.
Yeah, but can you imagine?
That would never break.
The pig pen he would drag through that thing, napkins here, stuff there. That poor house would be demolished with 2 days of him living there or staying there.
My next thing I want to talk about is them in the car and on the highway getting back from St. Louis to Chicago, them traveling at night. That was hysterical. Probably my favorite scene throughout the movie is just them two. You can see they start off frustrated, and then John Candy, he's so
doing
funny.
the mess around.
The mess around. Yes, how fun Del Griffith is, and he gets stuck with both of his hands on the side of and driving the car with his legs, and he's smoking, blows, and the car gets fired. There, like all the things that happen, like in a matter of minutes. Like he turns the car on. Oh yeah,
he's a figurative and literal train wreck, is what he is.
Exactly.
He's a force of nature, and.
We almost hit a deer.
Going back again, like that is, again, I'm not entirely. I mean, that's slapstick in a sense. It's very slapstick. The way when they're going in between the two trucks,
and their faces and they
go to
faces,
the quick flash that oh my god, he's gonna kill me, and then we see Del like for a quick second dressed up like the devil. Like laughing. That was funny.
And then the two of them sitting on the trunk with their back to the car, and there's a great sound effect. It's like, is that the car? The car's on fire, and they just start laughing.
And that for a scene for me harkens way back to silent movies because nothing needs to be said. That just the look, the timing of it. One looks, then the other, then they both look, then they both get up.
Yeah.
All of that with just it happening in the background. I thought it was great.
And now they're both just laughing at the end of it. Like, after everything they've been through, all they can do is
what
laugh.
else could happen?
What else could
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, but there can be more.
And again, that goes to, like, when you look at, we talk about editing and John Hughes and the pacing of the movie is just perfect. Like, there's not an ounce of fat, and he's able to put in so many gags and or jokes that are, and pretty much all of them work. They take you to the end of the movie where you have that very heartwarming feel. And, you know, we talked about the editing of that montage at the end on the train, which is, you know, to your point, when Neal Page pieces that together and it works so well, and part of it is because of that montage scene, you know, and it was in the hands of a guy, his name was Phil Hirsch, who did the editing, and this guy too. This guy worked on the Star Wars movies. You know, he worked on Star Wars, the first movie, not episode 4. I just call it Star Wars. He worked on Empire Strikes Back. He's worked with The Black Stallion Returns. He did Footloose, so he's worked with Kevin Bacon. You know, he did Mission Impossible, so he's worked with Brian De Palma. He worked on Blowout, which is one of the best edited movies out there.
Big movies.
I mean, he's worked on great
This is Paul
movies.
Hirsch, I think.
Paul Hirsch.
Yeah, I thought I heard you say Phil. I just don't want you to get letters.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll get letters, but at least they're watching.
Yeah.
So John Hughes like surrounded himself with some talented people, and you know it's funny when he talked about. Again, just going back, he wasn't the Hollywood type when he never had directed a movie before. And he was saying, I yelled action, and the cameras weren't even on.
Everybody go.
So, you know, and it was good on him because he knew if he was going to make this work, you can always you surround yourself with good people. And that, I think that it's a philosophy.
Well, better in a collaborative effort.
Absolutely.
Sure. And good writing as well.
And a lot of passion. I think that was the main thing. He had so much passion for this movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm specifically thinking, I know that there was an interview that he did right about John Hughes was basically pitched this movie in an interview. He just started acting out the whole thing. I think it comes from the fact that he like wrote it all in 3 days and just knew it so well.
Yeah.
But instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm doing this movie," you know, people get lost. He like fully
in an interview.
Yeah,
That's
or like
great.
with a publicist or something. I have it somewhere.
That's
on my
terrific.
computer.
I had not heard that. That's great.
He went through the whole thing like with full actions.
Wow.
He like pulled out all the stops. But and that just shows his passion, and that's what makes it work. A lot of people who are dedicated and talented, but really being in the heart of your movie.
And he really stuck. I appreciate too that he stuck to his guns on, you know, and
on the tirade scene, but he just kept it.
Yeah, well, you know, but it's funny. We were talking about this being a 3-hour movie. John Hughes shot over 600,000 feet, or 180,000 meters of film.
Which is a lot.
That's a lot
for especially a 90-minute film. That's
and that's when
twice.
Yeah, there was no digital back then, so you know, for a film print back then, you know, that's crazy.
It's
but
like Penny Marshall does the same thing.
I feel like if you have that much, you could just take a role and be like, I don't remember doing any of this.
You know, if Paramount were, I don't know. Apparently, the rumor has it, or the legend has it, that all of this footage is in a Paramount vault, and it's not.
So we can
have
a sequel.
Mishmash. Well, we could have a sequel, but I mean, I don't know. I think it would be interesting. According to this, it says film does indeed exist, although not in order. Moreover, it's a mess of footage that would take months, maybe even years, according to Hughes, to transform it into an actual film.
It'll be trucks, boats, and wagons.
And it's locked away in this vault. But I don't know. To me, look, the movie to me is perfect as is. It doesn't need to be a 3-hour movie. However, like to me, it would sort of kind of be fun if, like, say on a 30th anniversary, you release the movie as is. No, hear me out. And then if you have some of that B-roll footage, just have it as deleted scenes, just so that we can see it. Because there is a great scene that you can find now. You can find it on YouTube.
Okay, but let me show of hands here. I usually watch the deleted scenes.
Sure.
Usually you can see why they're deleted. I mean, there's a big
absolutely.
reason why they're deleted. So,
But there's
does everybody feel that way, or am I the only guy?
Some
that
of them,
normally
yes.
like, I would say 75%.
Yeah, it's a good, but there is a great deleted scene that's on the Blu-ray, actually, and I think you can find it on YouTube, where they're on the plane. Okay, if you notice when they were first on the plane, there's that great old guy character actor that's sitting
right
next to him.
next to him? Yeah.
Okay, well,
why aren't they using that guy?
yeah, well, they did, and
so
there's
they
a
just cut
scene.
it?
Yeah, there's a scene where they're eating. Or they're getting the food, and Del is like, "Oh, I just love the food on the plane," and he's like, "Oh, this is just like great." And Neal Page opens up this thing, and it's like this lasagna.
Yeah,
it looks like a hockey puck, and he goes to Del. He goes, "What do you think this was?" He goes, "I think 7 hours ago it was lasagna." He goes, "But with all the delays and they nuked it," he's like, he goes, "You gonna eat that?" He goes, "No," and so Del takes it, and then he goes to the old guy. He goes, "Hey, you want his roll?" He's not going to eat his roll. You want his roll? He goes, "Yeah, all right, I'll have his roll." He goes, "How about your brownie? You going to eat your brownie?" And Neal's like, "I'm going to have my brownie." He goes, "Oh, I was trying to get you the brownie." He goes, "But he's not going to part with it." And then in the same scene, like right over the chair, this huge wave of hair falls into Neal Page's tray. And he's sitting there, and you're like going, "Oh, good God." And then, like, they move it up, and John Candy takes the brownie from the hair, and he's like, "You sure you don't want it?" He goes, "You don't want your brownie?" He goes, "I don't want it." And he goes to the old guy. He goes, "You want brownie?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I'll take brownie." He goes, "Good, I'll cut it in half." He goes, "Here, I give you the big piece." And again, it's a funny scene. Did it need to be in the movie? No. Probably not, but I would... if that scene's funny, I'm willing to bet that there are a couple of others.
I'm sure there's some very good laughs.
Yeah, the Michael McKean scene apparently went on for a
Yeah,
long
I'm saying
time
why
too.
as I'm watching it, I go, okay, they must have cut some of that because you don't get Michael McKean out just for that.
Yeah, so. Yeah, he said his part, he had a lot more going on. So I mean, me as a fan, I wouldn't mind seeing some of that footage.
No, I know. I agree with you. I was reacting to. I thought you were going to say, let's see the whole 3 hours.
No.
I'm going, no.
No, we don't need to because I think the movie is perfect as is. But to throw that bonus disc on, that to me, it's sort of kind of like one of Hollywood's hidden treasures.
Yeah,
and it would be fun to watch at least some of them.
Mm-hmm. The scene that I want to know is why he has a black eye.
Yeah, that never got answered.
I'm sure that's somewhere in there, and I really want to know what happened. Yeah. Like, how did we get a semi truck of cheese, and how do you have a black
how do you have a black eye?
Maybe they just didn't cover it well enough with makeup. But this movie overall, it got some great ratings, and still it's on lists of favorite movies and holiday movies. And on IMDb, it has a current rating of 7.5. And I don't know the Rotten Tomatoes rating, but this movie it's still a classic, and the great thing about this movie is it's so timeless.
It's timeless.
It's really a movie you can watch at any decade and still relate to.
Absolutely.
Because we're always going to have problems traveling.
We always will.
That's never going to go away.
Until they come up with teleporters, then maybe we're going to...
Phil, what was your favorite, like, say, scene or the way that a scene was put together?
For me, what I liked about it, we've kind of talked about it, but we've never really... It's the fact that they don't know each other, right? So many movies are about friends and things kind of going wrong with them and finding out secrets about each other that they didn't know before, right? But they're friends to begin with. This is two people that are not friends, and so they have no history together, and they're finding out along the way, and so you can't even really be honest. And that's what makes the comedy. There's that, we really haven't gotten anywhere. I'm clearly bringing you down. And we as the audience, the reason why it's funny is because we're in on it of like, wow, you just want to get rid of the guy, but you're doing it through such nice words. And it's like, no. Candy goes back at him, no, we'll do better. No, it's fine. And then, the same kind of play is with the money. Like, hey, give me your address. I'll give you the money. It's a gift.
Yeah. All the times that Neal buys things more as like parting gifts.
Right.
But that didn't end up because they always end up together.
Yeah, and there's sort of an ironic line in the movie where Neal Page is yet again trying to distance himself from Del when they're at the diner. He goes, together we amount to a whole heck of a lot of nothing. Like we don't work well together. And in hindsight,
It's not you.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
me.
It's me. And,
Let's break
Break
up this
up.
relationship.
and the funny thing about that is they are only getting from point A to B to C because they are together. Like they are able to get there, separately. They haven't been able to get anywhere at all. They were stuck, but when they are together, they are able to get at least to the next destination, or to the next adventure, to the next truck filled with cheese, or to the next hotel.
Yeah, and you can make the argument, and not that you would need to in a comedy like this, but you could make that nobody gets anywhere alone. We all have to rely on each other for something.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just a reality that
I think
we
it's
have.
another theme.
Yeah, it's another theme that
I agree.
So,
lays in there.
another fun Thanksgiving film that I love, I watch every year multiple times.
It's like having the same meal at Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
You have to watch the same movie. That's
Exactly.
nice.
It's still every time I watch this movie, I still laugh like I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard.
great.
Okay, I must be the only one that sort of kind of like does the little like when that do 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 do
Yep.
like you just like it just makes you happy.
It's fun.
It's
Don't know
fun.
what that is. I'm sorry. What was
Yeah,
that?
hey, we
We
played it
have
at the
the
beginning,
movie.
right? Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Oh, the General Cinema. Oh.
that one right
That's
there.
fun. You can,
That's
and
fun.
Right.
It
You're like
reflects.
dancing now.
Yes, exactly. It reflects their personalities and their
Absolutely.
behaviors with each other. They're finally having fun together.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, if I could, I'd love to bring
Thank you,
up
Phil.
because
That's great.
it's awesome. And something about John Hughes when we talk about he uses music to great effect. I think in all of his movies. Did anybody know that John Hughes had his own record label? It was Hughes Records. He broke bands like Flesh for Lulu, and the reason why he created his own record label is because he wanted more control. He was he loved music, and again, if you look at Pretty in Pink, a lot of it takes place in a record shop. Some of his characters are really big into music. He used that, so yeah, he created his own label so he could take control of the music and put what he wanted into his movies, and I think that's great. Again, there aren't that many. I don't know who owns I don't know any writer-directors who own their own record label today.
So you could have the
but
music
the music
you want.
industry has changed, right? And it was great. So I want to turn the hands of time back because we talked about the sensibilities and I know Phil brought up that the culture has changed from '87 to 2013, but
Just a little.
just a
would hope.
tad. But let's take a look at what I want to sort of kind of show is, okay, so this movie opened up November 25th, 1987. The movies that came out at that time, and this is right around Thanksgiving, for that weekend, the number one at the box office was Three Men and a Baby. We had a Cinderella reissue was number 2. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles it was number 3, and that did $7 million. Now, Three Men and a Baby opened up to $10 million. Yeah, Leonard Nimoy, another Star Trek connection. But that movie opened up to $10 million. Okay, and today, and look how big Three Men and a Baby at that time was huge, and I'll get to how big in a second.
Planes was big too. They had a budget of $30 million, I believe, and made 45. And even
It made
back
49.
in that time,
It was
right,
$50 million, and
back at
It
that
had
time
a,
was
it had
huge.
a budget of $30 million.
I didn't know if it
Right.
was 30
Maybe-
because
maybe
I
not
couldn't
30,
find.
but
I couldn't
think
find.
I saw
couldn't
around
find
there
a budget.
too.
Yeah, 30.
I saw a thing.
Yeah, I
But
couldn't
this
find
movie
it.
was
They had
more
to create
successful.
whole new airlines. Think about it.
It was that
Planes
car
themselves
rentals.
were so
They
expensive.
built them. I mean,
Oh my God.
I'm kidding. I don't think I'm.
So
That just seems like I'm shocked by
big
that
budget
number.
for those
Yeah,
two. Yeah, it
that's
does seem a
surprising
bit.
to me.
Well, I just want to again. So we had the number one was Three Men, Cinderella reissue from Disney, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The number 4 movie, Fatal Attraction,
Okay.
was number 4. Running Man with Schwarzenegger was number 5. Nuts, a Barbra Streisand movie, was number 6. Flowers in the Attic, which they're remaking as I think a television movie, was number 7. Teen Wolf 2,
Nice.
spelled Too,
Nice.
was number 8. Dirty Dancing was number 9 in its 15th week of release
Wow.
at that time,
Yeah.
and it was number 9.
Oh goodness.
So, and then that was followed by Baby Boom, which was a Diane Keaton comedy.
Love that film.
Yep.
We should cover that one.
And then Hello
Okay.
Again, and then The Princess Bride at number 12, which
I
had
love
been out
that.
at that time for 10 weeks. So that was the landscape back in in 1987 for this weekend. Now,
Big movies.
I want to talk about like grosses, and because that has
Okay, real quick.
changed. Well, what we got is in 1987 for that year, the top movie was Three Men and a Baby with $167 million. Okay, 167. That was the top movie of 1987.
Really? 3 Men and a Baby was the top movie?
Yep, 167. The second movie was Fatal Attraction.
Yeah, that I know did well.
Okay. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was 3, and that did 153, and that was followed up by Good Morning Vietnam at $123 million. Now, what I find fascinating about this is in 1987, there were only 4 movies that cracked $100 million, and back then that was considered a large feat. And we're talking about releasing Three Men and a Baby did that on only 1,800 screens. Okay, they hit 167.
Do we
Fatal
know how many
Attraction.
Screens for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
As a matter of fact, I do. I have that here somewhere. That was on 1,118 screens.
Wow.
Okay. So today, that is considered
Nothing.
that's nothing because
Paltry.
let's take a look at today, and this isn't
$100 million.
this isn't including Hunger Games, but today at 2013, top box office movies, top grossing movies, Iron Man at $409 million, Despicable Me 2 $365
But you're
million.
talking worldwide, right? That's not domestic.
No, we're talking domestic gross.
What?
2013 domestic.
The thing
gross.
with those
Iron
movies,
Man was
Iron Man 3.
$409 million. There isn't a movie in the top 10 thus far this year that is under. The 10th movie is The Croods. That movie made $187 million thus far in 2013.
Oh my
but the
God.
thing is, those films that were now to the 2013s, there's special effects, there's technology is so grand, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
$20.
No, I understand. No, I get that, but look at the release patterns. Iron Man went out on 4,253 locations. Okay, Despicable Me 4,003. Man of Steel 4,207.
Right,
We're talking triple the
Yeah.
amount of screens.
And you also got to adjust
And
for
triple the
inflation.
amount
No,
of money.
No, but it's amazing.
It's crazy how our distribution
yeah.
pattern, and again, how a Planes, Trains, and Automobile would factor in. Back in '87, a movie could play, like Dirty Dancing was in its 15th week.
Right.
And it was still cracking the top 10. Very few movies today will
Are
stick
on the
around.
screen for 15 weeks.
15 weeks.
Yeah,
That's
unheard of.
well, 15 weeks would be 8, 12,
4
3,
months.
4 months. Yeah. In 4 months, most
3.5.
movies are
On
going
DVD.
on to
Already
Blu-ray.
out,
yeah.
They're on
Right.
Blu-ray in 4 months.
Crazy.
So you allowed films to play out longer to get, and again, when you hit 100 million, that was a big deal. That was huge back then. You know, and
If
it's
you hit $100 million, you're hoping that the budget's under that. That's what
I know.
you're
You're
hoping.
right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And 100 million isn't exactly the milestone.
No.
You know, and I know like today, a lot of prognosticators, you know, we'll bring up Hunger Games for 2 seconds, which we'll talk about next week. But, you know, a lot of prognosticators have that in for the weekend, no lower than 160, 165 million. That's for an opening weekend. So, you know, yeah, times have changed.
Well,
But-
Marisa has her way. It'll be that.
I feel like today's movies nowadays, it's just as sad as it may sound that Hollywood spits out movies just to make money. And back then in the 1980s, Hollywood spat out movies to tell a story.
A lot of them, yeah, or to tell something different. And
I don't know. I'm going to take the devil's advocate point of view on that. I think the business side of Hollywood always just makes movies to make money.
that's true.
And I think
Well,
there are
from a
just as many
business,
movies
yeah.
now that are made for art.
Yeah,
They're
in the
harder to get
80s.
made. But every generation, every decade, they say it's harder to get an art movie made. It's harder, and they say it every decade. So I don't really know if it's harder now to make a movie just for artistic purposes or not. I just know that everybody says it's harder.
Well, you
You
know,
know, for
it's-
me, I
go
think writers have moved on to TV, and
Well, that's clear.
where lots of writers back then used to write for film, and they were the amazing writers of their time.
Yeah.
You know, now it's like, okay, well, you know what, we want job security, we want this and that, and you know, we want to tell a longer story, and we want to tell it well. Hence, they're on TV.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they have more, and they have far more avenues for which to get their product to the
Absolutely.
market.
Yeah, but you know, and again, to your point regarding, you know, making art for art's sake, so
Yeah.
to speak, you know, Cami, you know, we talked about this a little. There was big news this past week about Sony Pictures. Not only are they looking to trim over $100 million off of their overhead. They've also, yesterday was a big announcement that they're cutting their film slate back. So, you know, what's happening today anyways is there is this part of attrition, like where studios are not releasing as many movies as they used to. And what's happening now is like they are looking for more franchises.
Yeah.
They're looking for the bigger picture where that middle picture may not find its place the way it used to.
But you're also seeing other things, because you got your Netflix, you've got your Amazon, you got all these other content providers that are looking for original programming, not just for TV viewing or for episodic, but they're also looking for original content so they can be considered a production house, so to speak.
True.
And get content that way. So it's going to be interesting how to see how that all plays out.
You know, but bottom line for me is, you know, I don't want the movies to go away.
No.
You know, we don't want the theatrical experience. You know, we
want more movies.
We want more movies.
Yeah.
And we do want more movies.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and again, we're only talking 26 years, which in the
but
whole grand scheme of thing isn't a whole hell of a lot.
No, but it is 26 years is a great time difference because nowadays we have
generation, basically.
Yeah, we have better ways to promote the movies. We have the internet, we have social media websites, we have our phones that have connection to the internet. Nowadays we can generate more money
Faster.
because we have things, accessibility to things to promote it faster.
But you're right. But
things
again,
can
when
catch
you're
on very
looking
quickly once they do.
No, but you're right. But when you have like a 3 Men and a Baby, which does $167 million with the tools that they had to market it.
Not only that, but you have to consider there's so much more product out there for people to take, because you only have a finite time for each audience member to see
That's
things.
true.
So all the slew of stuff you can see on the internet, all the stuff you can see on TV with all the channels like crazy. So even though you might have better ways to advertise to them, you're
Competing
pool
against
of
more?
you're competing against way more.
By the way, I mean, there's a statistic out there where, you know, you used to talk about opening weekend and you kind of, that was its own thing. Now, literally, people can go see on a Friday night and you can kind of project where it's going to be Sunday. But if social media all of a sudden said Hunger Games is the worst movie ever,
which we're not saying.
We're not.
Heck, we love it. We love it.
I'm making an example, people. If this Friday people all of a sudden start tweeting, "Don't ever see Hunger Games," by Sunday, the movie's dead.
But they won't because people have already been tweeting that it's amazing.
Yes.
All right, we get your
It's not
point,
even
Sarah.
out.
Yeah, well, you know, but and I'll go back to, you know, but it's interesting because I'll go back to that first Twilight movie, which everybody pretty much said was garbage, but it didn't keep that movie or that juggernaut from making. That movie made a ton of money, and the next movie is what we
franchise.
got.
It's a fantastic comedy.
Yeah. But I think I like Phil's point though.
Yeah, it's a
because
great point.
It you can make or break a film, but even a great film, if it gets the wrong press too early, can kill it.
Well, you know,
and it's just for crying out loud, it's social media.
I know.
You're gonna use that as your barometer. I mean, it's social media. I mean,
Well,
word of mouth is good or bad, but can
Also-
you make up your own mind? Go
Also,
ahead.
the thing is with Planes, Trains, I think it's more generated to family and adults and some kids here and there. But the like Hunger Games and whatnot, that's geared towards the teenagers, the young adult generation demographic, and who uses the social media websites more so than the young adults.
But also, you know, if we're really gonna dissect this part, for me, and I'd be interested in Cami's perspective on this, is that, you know, you used to have home viewing, and you know, you could perhaps watch this as a family. Now, you know, you gather to see a movie. One has an iPad, one has his iPhone, one has his PS4 that he's playing, and you know, the family members are trying to watch this movie, but nobody gives a shit. No. No, but you know what I mean? There's so many ways to segment your time just within that like family bonding time that, you know, it just gets lost. And so how do you, even as just a family, have a family movie night?
No, we do. And actually, we still love the whole physical content watching a movie. I mean, my kids have iPads, they have iPods, they have the Xboxes, but we still watch.
Can we come over and play?
Yes, it'll be a big party, more than family. And just like when we watched Planes and Trains last week, we all still love watching it, you know, on the big screen.
But that's because you guys have made an effort. You especially, I'm sure, has made an effort of having that happen, and that's kind of a regular thing, right?
Yeah, we love the experience. I mean, there's nothing like watching the movie like that, not on an iPad or you know, smaller technology device. So
and I can attest I mean, Cami is very
Congratulations,
family.
good to you,
And,
by the
yeah,
way.
and it is, and it's great because
it's
she
great
will-
dividends. Not only you get to that experience, but great dividends down the line. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, but you're right, and I was gonna, just to further that. I mean, Cami, I always hear these great. She always says like, we took the kids and their friends, and we went to go see Man of Steel. We bought tickets ahead of time. We got all this, or whatever other family picture, and I think that. I wish there were more people like that, and because it is important, like the movie-going experience, and to have the kids love that sort of thing. Your kids loved Hunger Games, and again at that screening, right? That you took your family. You know that your kids really wanted to see this movie, and you saw it on a big screen, and it wasn't about the iPad. And you're right. There are Phil. To your point, there are way more diversions, we'll call them today.
There's debate about having iPhones in a movie theater.
Oh yeah.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah. But I guess me personally, I don't want to speak for anybody here because some of my thoughts are just dopey. But I love the movie theater going experience. I always have as a kid. I don't think that the movie experience is ever going to go away. It may get smaller, but I think what will evolve is the experience itself. We're already seeing it. The large format specialty type theater, like that's becoming more relevant today. The dine-in theater is becoming very popular. They're making, sound. I mean, you see a movie in Dolby Atmos sound. They're changing the way of the experience, which I think is fantastic.
Pretty soon you're going to have the virtual thing. You're going to be in the movie as it's happening.
Yeah, you could be.
I want a re-release of this movie in theaters.
Yeah.
It would be great.
I was not around when this movie came out.
Well, why not do it on the 30th anniversary?
Yeah, why not?
Do it and, have it in memoriam for John Candy. Release that Blu-ray.
And John Hughes.
And John Hughes, yeah, absolutely. And, and see what happens. But again, I'm not sure if Paramount will take the risk.
Yeah. This movie's timeless. And every time I watch this, it's sentimental.
Oh.
It hits home with me. I just can't say enough good things about this.
It's a good time to see it. So,
yeah. So
Yes, definitely.
to keep this conversation going, if you can't get enough of this movie, where can everyone find you, Demetri? Go ahead.
You can find me here at Anatomy of a Movie. Go in at anatomyofamovie.com. Write your comments. I'll write back. Been starting to look at comments, which is great that people are writing comments. Go on iTunes.
Yeah, exactly. Go on iTunes.
YouTube.
Download Anatomy of a Movie podcast. We have
Absolutely.
other great films that we dissect. I know Sarah and John, you aren't really on Twitter. Or
No, but you
anything,
can find me at
you can
Cami's
follow
house
you.
playing Xbox with the kids.
That's right.
I'll be there too. I'll be there
Yes,
too. No
yes,
worries.
come over.
Cami, where can we find you?
You can find me at Cami.Martinez at Technicolor.com.
Excellent. And Phil, thank you for engineering in the booth. You can find him here at Anatomy of a Movie. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Serafini TV. And follow all of us here at Movie Anatomy on Twitter. And check out our awesome website, anatomyofamovie.com.
And
So basically, lots of places.
Lots of places.
We're all over
You're
the place.
everywhere.
And
next
and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Hopefully,
Thanksgiving.
your traveling experience is better than these two.
But hopefully you get something out of it in the end.
Yes.
Outside of just turkey and stuffing.
All right.
Bring a new friend. Bring a new friend.
Absolutely.
I think that's the message, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Salute someone else.
All right. Thank
wanna
you,
come to
guys.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, come on over, everybody.
Thanksgiving for everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And we'll see you next film.
Every time you go away.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.